is Flip Flop. This week we stay up past our bedtime for Late Night with the Devil, the 2023 horror film written and directed by Cameron and Colin Cairnes. Say that 3 times real fast. In the film, we witness a live Halloween television broadcast from 1977 that goes horribly wrong, unleashing evil into the living rooms of American viewers. Did the movie scare the bejeebus out of us, or was it as stale as the 1970s era garb? I don't know why I missed the word garb on there, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
Find out this week on Flick Flops.
Oh, hi, Gary.
Late Night with the Devil.
They should have so did that. Would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Late Night with the Devil, Gary, man. Let's do some quick numbers on this so we can get into talking about this film. Rotten Tomatoes, our aggregator that we use, has this thing sitting at 97 with the critics, Gary. That's a 9 and a 7 together, and 81 with the audience. This film is almost perfect in the audience's, the critics' eyes. A budget, I could not find numbers on the budget. If they're out there, I just don't know where to find them. I tried and tried. But box office numbers, what I found is it had made up to $11 million at the time of this recording. I know it was in theaters briefly, not a wide release because this was released on Shudder, I think was the service that you could see this film on. As you mentioned earlier, written and directed by brothers Colin and Cameron Cairnes. Do we think that's how it's pronounced?
That's what I'm going with.
Cairnes. Anyway,
I don't think it's that, but I don't know.
These guys wrote and directed this film, and yeah, that's all I got on this stuff for that. So we can get right into the film with this. So, look, I'm checking the boxes here on this thing, and I don't want to give away a whole lot.
Yeah.
The storyline and the plot for this thing, I enjoyed. It's well done. This is right up my alley for films, and this was very good. Character development. I mean, they didn't spend a ton of time on it, but I don't think it's a bad thing. You know, I don't have a highlight on good or bad. So my highlights are good. Or the acting I thought was pretty darn good on this thing, and the performances a little hokey, but I think they were playing it in the 70s. So some of it was a little over the top, the exaggeration and some of the way the characters were, but I think it was done well. Direction and cinematography to me was another highlight. I thought this thing just flowed well. I have one slight little flaw, but I don't think it's a big deal. And I actually scratched it out of my notepad, but we'll mention it at the end. The production and design of this thing was fantastic. This felt like a 70s to me, man. I mean, I was like, this is awesome. And the other highlights I have is originality. I thought this was a pretty original idea. Somebody might point out that there's something like this out there. If there is, I don't know about it. But this was a pretty original idea for me, and I like that. And I do think there might be some cultural impact on this with the aspect of the genre. I think we'll see some more films like this in this vein.
That's good thinking. Yeah.
And it kind of dips into the found footage, a la the Blair Witch Project in the Paranormal Activities films. So
almost like a parallel to that.
It's they're in the ballpark together. They're all just running laps together. So that's my kind of good. If you got anything going, I mean.
Well, I'll say I love the story. I thought the story was great. I love the setting and the set pieces. I thought the production value of that, it really puts it in the 70s.
It's just set the tone. Like I believe we were watching this.
All the lead up, there's history that's shown.
Yeah.
All the clips and the little pieces that they did a great job with the production of this and really setting it in that time period and making it feel real. I will tell you that as we watched this, I watched it. Tara sat next to me reading, but she glanced up and she said, this is in the intro part where they're talking about the show. And she said, did you used to watch that show? And I was like, it's not a real show. But it kind of shows you how convincing that all of that really was, because it really, they did it in such a way that it really felt realistic.
Yeah.
Acting, you mentioned the girl that played the young girl in this film was very creepy. She did a great job. The rest of the performances I'll talk about in a moment. David Dastmalchian, a Flick Flop alum, because we had him in Last Voyage of Demeter.
That's where I saw him from.
He's been in many things, and he is another one of those actors that just melds into whatever role he plays.
Yeah.
I thought he was fantastic in this, and I could see him doing a lot more. I would say he probably would be top billing on this film, and I could see him doing, more things like that. Yeah. Last thing, this is not necessarily good or bad. I just thought it was interesting that the lore included Bohemian Grove. If you're familiar with it, and I just thought that was extremely interesting and kind of pivotal to the film. I don't want to give anything away. I'm just going to say it's kind of pivotal to part of that. So
I have a note. I just wrote the Grove, and then I put an arrow putting Bohemian Grove. Yeah. And then I was like, well, don't dive into this.
No.
Just mention that I mean, that's another whole. There's probably podcasts about the Bohemian Grove.
Sure, absolutely, and books, I'm sure.
But
that's not weird. This is not the place to talk about that, and we won't.
Right.
But I found that very interesting.
I did too. I did too. I mean, I was like, it's almost like it's the second note I have on my list. The first note I have is I'll get to in a minute. Again, I said I don't have anything necessarily bad to
well, let's go to bad. Let's go to bad. And then I'll let you go ahead and say anything that you have, and then I've got a couple things. Just
if you've got bad, go for it. I don't have anything that I think is bad. Like I said, I have one thing that I'll bring up, but this was sold as we found the original videotape of this.
Yes.
And then you're watching the show, the production, like ba da 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 da, and then when they cut the commercial, there's cameras following the characters around.
This is a big note that I have. Yeah.
Okay.
So continue.
I had issue because well, then you're taking me out of that found footage thing. But I watched someone else's review, and he kind of explained it, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna scratch my note because it's not horrible, and it's not a knock at all. It's just like you're selling it as one thing, and then you have this going on. But the way this guy explained it was just like, yeah, they kept the cameras rolling, and they were just like because they kind of got a little bit of shakiness to them. And he was kind of selling it as like, well, they were just meant to be that way. They were trying to show you behind the scenes of the show, and I was like, I guess.
Okay, so my point about that, I was going to talk about the other thing first, but since you're already on it, I'd like to talk about that. I considered that a small knock on the film.
Yes.
Specifically for two reasons. One, it does take you out of it a little bit. It is explained in the movie. We also obtain backstage footage of it, which we lace in to give you context of the movie or context of what went on with the show. I don't want to give away anything about the movie, so I have to kind of vaguely talk about a couple things in it.
But there wouldn't have been backstage footage is what I'm getting at.
At that point in time, they wouldn't be able to do that kind of stuff. And if they did, they'd be rolling a big camera around. So that takes you out of it a little bit. Also, there's a few key points in the movie where you see the thing that's happening. Like they're setting up the rules for it, right? So you're supposed to see this backstage footage that's supposed to help add context to the movie and give you a little bit of the story instead of being some sort of exposition or something on what's going on. I get it, and I love it, and I accept it for what it is. I just think there's a couple. If I had to knock the movie at all, there's a couple problems with that. One of them is there's a scene where something happens, and they run back the footage of what happens, and it's seen in a different way. Try to be extremely vague here without giving anything away.
Yeah. It's hard.
Because of that, it makes that whole fiction of what you're seeing on camera and the back, all that extra stuff, lose a little bit of its allure because it's kind of like that doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really fit with the format of what they were originally going for. That makes it a little knock on that. I don't know how else you'd get away. You do it. Right. It also leads up to a very ambiguous ending. There's a way you could explain what happened, but I think there's a lot left there for you to kind of piece together some things for yourself. But even the way that plays out kind of breaks that own rule about the backstage thing. So I think while I love the movie and I thought overall it was great, there was just a little bit of that broke it for me.
Yeah,
That was
right.
just,
Exactly.
that's just the knock, you know. The other bad thing I have listed is the acting. I thought the skeptic and the sidekick, the two actors playing those roles, a little weak.
Yeah.
They were not up to the task, I felt, of at least David Dastmalchian and the little girl. The rest of the cast was pretty good. Those two in particular, I didn't feel quite got there. The psychic that's in it, that is played up really goofy, but
Yeah.
it's clearly on purpose. And that's supposed to give you a whole is he, isn't he vibe.
Right.
Again, I don't want to say too much more about it, but I just thought that if I had to knock acting, it would be those two characters, because I thought the skeptic was a little like overplayed, and the sidekick was a little too bumbly for me, a little too like, I don't know. But other than that, man, I really liked the movie. So I don't know if you have anything else or if you want to go to reviews, but that's
just a couple of quick things. You mentioned the skeptic. To me, I wrote down very quickly, this is the Amazing Randy and Uri Geller. That's what that was.
Oh yeah.
That was a total tip of the hat to the Amazing Randy, because he spent his life trying to debunk.
And I think one of the historical photos that showed in there is the skeptic with a guy bending spoons.
It was
not Uri Geller, but
but a
very similar looking person.
The one thing I thought, and this is something that this is just a nothing burger, but every time you go to a movie, if you're at the theater or wherever, and you see the opening credits, it's opening and shows you all the production companies.
Yeah.
I thought this was like Family Guy, because it just seemed like it was never going to end. Because Gary, I wrote it down. There were 8 production companies.
That's hilarious.
So you remember is either the Family Guy or the Simpsons, where he's like, okay, now they're starting a movie. Oh, this looks good. It's a period piece. It's like, period piece movies. I'm like, oh, that's exactly how I felt.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
And the funny thing was, not funny, but just interesting, is like, this thing was shot in Australia.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it was shot in Australia. With the help of, some of these, like one of the production companies is like Abu Dhabi. Like they must have really struggled to get funding for this project. But let's cut to the chase. This thing was awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. I'll give you my rating right now, so we can just move on and start just kissing this film's ass.
Go for it.
I give this thing 1, Gary. I'd give it 0 if you can do an emoji for 0. But this is to me, for me, this is a perfect film. I didn't want this film to end, even though the ending takes me away from it a little bit, because again, you're supposed to be watching a found footage piece. And then we start seeing all his. I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah,
you see other things happening that just couldn't have happened in the film or in the footage. I don't care. I want these guys to make more films.
Yeah.
I don't want a sequel to this. I want maybe some kind of aftermath or a part 2 of what happened. But I love what these guys went with this film. This was everything I wanted it to be in a movie. Everything.
I can't disagree. That is exactly how I feel about it. And I gave it 1 TP. So ironically, we were running. I guess we could give it a 0.5 if we really wanted to.
Whatever you can do, the very lowest.
Then I'll say let's amend our scores to 0.5, because I really enjoyed it, man. And this is one I would watch again. I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll watch it again.
I'll go watch it right now by myself. I loved it.
Yeah, I thought it was really good.
I was lost in this movie. I had to remind myself to take some notes, because I was like, man, I am just loving this movie.
Yeah.
And I wish my daughter was with me, because this is right up her alley too, and we would have loved this movie together. But I've told her, like, you got to see it. Go watch it as soon as you can.
This is one where I saw the trailer for it, and I was like, I want to see that film.
Yeah, my daughter sent me the trailer. She goes, well, do you know about this? And I was like, what is this madness? I cannot wait.
Yeah.
So these guys are fantastic, and this film is completely worth watching if you like horror films. If you don't like horror films, don't watch. I mean, clearly you're not going to watch it, but if you do, this is original, man. This is well done.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, everybody. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know if you saw Late Night with the Devil and what did you think about it. Put it down in the comments. Thanks.
Bye.
And we out.
This has been a Touch of Madness production, brought to you by the creative minds at Tommy Twins Media.